It's not awful platforming, but there are so many little things that accumulate and turn into a really painful experience. First off, the controls are stiffer than they should be. I tried this game with two different controllers, and in both cases, there's a microsecond delay in jump commands. Unless the game just outright decides it doesn't want to register the command at all and send you careening into one of those bottomless pits you only see in games like this. And that sucks, because this is a game about precision jumping and obstacle avoidance. You don't build up momentum like in a Mario or Sonic game. You maintain a single, casual jogging speed, and you don't have a lot of variance in the height and distance in your jumps. In that respect, it's a lot more like a Mega Man game, which also has a fixed speed and jump distance, but those games at least shake it up by allowing you to choose which order you take on the levels, and subsequently, which order you get power-ups, giving you new ways to fight enemies or make your way through the other levels. Shattered Reality really could have used power-ups, and there's easy context for them. Just make the power-ups different morphs. I mean, temporarily become a flying creature to circumvent some of the harder jumping puzzles. I don't know, a cockroach morph to give you invincibility to obstacles, stuff like that. I mean, turning into animals is the whole selling point of the franchise. It's the goddamn title. But the one thing Shattered Reality is missing is morphing. For all their faults, the other two Animorph games at least had shit tons of morphing. But this game seems so keen on keeping it in its own little unengaging designated zones. Okay, but back to the platforming. Another problem with it was one that was so small that it took me forever to even notice it, is that you can't turn around in place. You take a tiny step every time you turn around. Now that's a problem in a game that is about very specific jumps. It makes lining up the jumps more of a hassle, but there are points where the platforms are so narrow that any tiny step could send you tumbling when all you wanted to do was turn around. And then at any given moment, the game may suddenly change its axis and you find yourself moving up the screen instead of going left or right. These bits aren't impossible, but the jumps are harder to judge and usually include timed obstacles like lasers or moving platforms, and that's just not nice. Oh, and then sometimes you're going down the screen and not up, and therefore have to make leap of faith after leap of faith, which is kind of bullshit. Now, the game does seem to realize its difficulty because, at least at first, it's really easy to pick up extra lives and health. There are a lot of coins with the Animorphs logo on them because, reality has been shattered, and for every 100 you grab, you get another life, and you'll be surprised how quickly they add up. There's also 1-ups in the forms of glowing orbs because, reality has been shattered. There are floating first aid signs that give you health because, reality has been shattered. And what are these floating sugar cubes, you might ask? Why, they're morphing cubes, naturally, and they serve as checkpoints because, say it with me, reality has been shattered. But while that does help mitigate all the pixie dust deaths, I would argue that it's still not enough. These levels are long! Really fucking long! I would guess that at their shortest, without dying, each level is no shorter than 10 minutes! That's absurd! That's maybe how long a final level should be, when a game should be at its most difficult. And finally, the biggest cause of frustration is that you never know what the rules are at any given time. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's consider the ground zero for platformers, Super Mario Bros. Just by playing the very first level, World 1-1, you can learn all the rules. Enemies damage, pits insta-kill, you die if an enemy touches you when you're normal sized, but you can take a hit if you have certain power-ups. Floating platforms, traveling through pipes, breaking blocks, utilizing Koopa shells, all of these can be figured out right at the beginning, and while new enemies and trickier jumps will appear down the road, these same fundamental rules will always apply. In Shattered Reality, these rules are always in a state of flux. You never know if an obstacle is going to damage you or insta-kill you. Let's compare two obstacles, a log rolling down a hill and a snowball rolling down a hill. Very similar hazards, but the log will only take a small chunk of damage away, while the snowball will kill you instantly. If you were to apply this idea to Mario, imagine if there was a Koopa that looked an awful lot like the Koopas you've been fighting up to this point, only it instantly kills you regardless of if you have a mushroom or a fire flower power-up. Now imagine if it was a different kind of Koopa each level, and you had no idea the lethality of a Koopa at any given moment. Now imagine each level had a dozen or so different types of Koopa with random, indeterminable lethalities. Now imagine each level is 10 minutes long. Now imagine having less than perfectly responsive controls. Are you starting to see how this all starts stacking up? This is a game that'll have you jumping platformers, followed by pattern memorization, and once you think you're in the clear, surprise ice physics that you've never had to deal with before and won't deal with again? Fuck that. What you end up with is a gauntlet. You can either play on total caution mode, making baby steps around levels because you have no idea if the giant Venus flytraps will kill you or only harm you, and you cross your fingers that the controls won't give out on you suddenly. Or you can play by jumping headfirst into it, dying a lot and memorizing the details. Either way, this is not fun. Also, this is more a personal problem for me, but certain floating platforms will collapse a second after you land on them. That's kind of a standard trope for platformers. Basically, platforms with red lights will fall and one with green lights will stay in the air, which is a bitch when you're colorblind like me. There is one more part of the game, where you turn into a flying or swimming morph and you run through a track trying to beat the clock. It's similar to the beat the clock segments in Know the Secret, only with more open space and fewer obstacles that hurt you. I beat each of these segments the very first try really easily. So, guys, everyone was aware that Tobias was the cult favorite character of the series at this point, right? I understand how you can't implement him into the central gameplay, but here's 2 games with segments where you control flying animals, and you don't control Tobias anywhere in them? For shame, people. I guess I should be positive about something, huh? Well, this is easily the nicest looking of the 3 Animorph games, with some nicely detailed pre-rendered backgrounds. Character models have less detail, they're mostly Play-Doh blobs and have all the facial expression of Slender Man, but that's okay, because what they lack in detail, they make up for in really fluid character animations. It's actually really neat. There are only 3 cutscenes in the game, the opening one, the ending one, and the scene if you lose all your lives, showing the Animorphs all infested despite no direct correlation between exploding into pixie dust and becoming a controller. These cutscenes actually look really nice for a PlayStation game, but that should be expected from a company that's been working for the console since before it was released. Now, I have a confession to make. Animorphs for the Game Boy Color was butt ugly and made no sense. Know the Secret held your hand the entire way and was really lame. But it was Shattered Reality that I couldn't finish. It was Shattered Reality that I ended up rage quitting at about the 2/3 point. While the other 2 games at least allow you to pause and catch your breath and think about the stupid shit that just happened, Shattered Reality is like trying to break through a wall with your head. And after I would finish a level after dozens and dozens and dozens of tries, there was no satisfaction, just utter exhaustion. It's just so weird. Everything seems to point to it being the most fun of the 3. It's active, it's got a faster pace, it's not totally broken, but maybe that just means my expectations were made higher because of it. I did manage to find video from the rest of the game from people far tougher and more dedicated than I, and it's all pretty much more of the same, ending in the one and only boss fight. Visor 3 and a morph that looks like Skyther on steroids. It's the only fight that might actually take you to the 2-minute mark, but only because the platform keeps lowering and you have to wait for it to rise up again before you can take another shot at him. And then you have all the crystals and the day is saved? Reality is unshattered? I really have no idea what's going on. This game is bad, but not obviously so. It's a kind of nuanced bad that really makes you dig to figure out why it doesn't feel right. It's the least train wrecky of the 3 games, and if I had a gun to my head and had to play one of them for all of eternity, I guess I would go with this one. They say it was rushed. I believe it. They say it was completely overhauled at the last minute. I believe it. They say Single Track has never done a platformer before. I believe it. As an Animorph game, this one pretty much cheats with its whole reality is shattered gimmick. There's a Yerk pool, but it's a Yerk pool with lava and Ninja Turtles ooze and Yerks the size of mana rays and shifting pointless platforms and a rotating death tunnel for no good reason. Hey look, it's the gardens, but it's a war zone with floating blocks of ice and giant man-eating plants and rope bridges. Why? Because reality is shattered, that's why. If anything, this is the one game that feels the most like a Megamorphs book, larger than life, and none of it will matter to continuity in the end. I think the biggest crime is how little morphing plays into anything, and there's no reason why it couldn't have. I already mentioned that morphing is pretty much tailor-made for platforming power-ups, but you could also just base the platforming around changing between animals. Instead of making jumps as a human that would make Michael Jordan blush, you switch between animals that best suit the situation, like a monkey for swinging from platform to platform, a cheetah if you need to outrun something, a spider to stick to walls. You've got the entire animal kingdom to work with. Be creative. I don't know, give us a giant water bear or something. It'll work. Reality is shattered, remember? Well, that's Animorphs Shattered Reality, but that's not the end of the series. No, for the fourth and final episode, I'll be looking to you guys for help. We're going to be constructing the theoretical Animorphs video game. What I'd like you guys to do is discuss just what a modern Animorphs game might look like. Would it be combat-oriented, stealth-oriented, puzzle-solving, maybe another stab at platforming? Should there be RPG elements? Should it be mission-based or sandbox? How should the crowd dynamic be considered? Should it be a multiplayer game? Maybe even a massive online multiplayer game? How would morphs be managed? How would each morph change gameplay? Comment below, submit video responses, and I'll be editing your thoughts as well as my own into the final episode of this series in about 2 weeks' time. Let's see what we can come up with.